It all started with a very simple idea. Tell the stories of how successful middle market CEOs made it to the corner office. I'm Brant Handley, founder and managing director of Resource Options International, or ROI. We're the USA's premier executive search firm focused exclusively on empowering middle market companies to attract, hire, and retain A players while transforming top executives' careers and lives. ROI's Into the Corner office is dedicated to discovering how middle market CEOs advance their career, and we're making these remarkable and sometimes quite unbelievable stories available to you for the very first time. Listen and learn about the challenges they've overcome, the interesting people they've met along the way, and the lessons learned that steered these executives' unique journey into a middle market corner office of their own. I know you enjoy these CEO stories as much as I've enjoyed recording them, so thank you for listening today. And if you like what you've heard, rate us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm looking forward to you joining me on the next great middle market CEO adventure into the corner office. Today, my guest is Shashi Jasthi, President and CEO of Solugenix. He is responsible for driving client and partner value through innovative technology and business solutions. Shashi has over 20 years of experience managing information technology and consulting organizations. He holds an MBA from the University of Chicago Booth School of Business, an MS in Computer Science from Northwestern, and a Bachelor of Technology degree in Electronics Engineering from the Indian Institute of Technology in Madras, India. Shashi lives in Scottsdale, Arizona with his wife and 2 children. His claim to fame? He can sing some oldies on an acoustic guitar that can clear a large public park in under 2 minutes. Shashi Jasthi, welcome into the corner office.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you here. And for those of you that are listening, we're at about 10 weeks into this crisis. And, it's been an interesting experience for all of us listening. And of course, those on the call. Shashi, how have you been doing through this period?
Oh, I'm sitting here in my computer room at home, and we're all going through the same thing.
Yes.
I have 2 children. We all 4 of us, my wife and 2 children, and I have been cooped up in our Scottsdale office for the last several weeks.
Right. These are very interesting times. Well, I'll be interesting to hear as we get into the podcast some of the impacts this is going to have on your firm and, some of the changes perhaps that'll be taking place in your workplace. But I think we're facing a new normal. This is going to change our lives in so many ways as of course, 9/11 did 20 odd years ago. And it'll be very interesting to see how that plays out. But let's start at the beginning. And yours is a very interesting immigrant story as we spoke a couple of weeks back. Tell me a little bit about your early years growing up in India, and what your early family life was like.
Yeah, I grew up in a city called Hyderabad in southern India. That city was almost unknown to Americans for most of the time. It's a mid-sized city. That means it has 5 million people or 10 million people nowadays.
And very much a tech sector now, right?
Yeah. It's become quite well known, at least in the technology industry in the US, because after Bangalore, which is the pioneer in bringing information technology around the world, Hyderabad seems to be a place where pretty much every multinational, including American multinationals, have set up a foothold
operations
there.
Yeah. Was that going on when you were growing up? In other words, has this developed more recently, or was that in this development mode while you were growing up in Hyderabad?
Oh, it was so different. It definitely was not going on. So one of the things that I tend to think about is India as well as Hyderabad before 1991 and after 1991. What happened in 1991 was Indian government has decided that they need to liberalize and embrace free market economy if India had to prosper. So before 1991, it was really a different world. Opportunities were very limited. and entrepreneurship was neither appreciated nor rewarded because majority of the economy was dominated by the government and, of course, some kind of a crony capitalism. But after 91, it has opened up, and one of the effects of that is this global IT industry that helped Hyderabad prosper.
Right,
so before 91, it definitely was not that way. And I left India in 89 and came to Chicago. So
you left before that really happened.
Yeah, I left never knowing that this revolution would happen, and it's almost like the Wild West of technology there.
Yeah. Tell me about your parents, brothers and sisters. What were some of the inspiring things that happened while you grew up?
Oh, yes. Both my parents were quite educated. My mom is a graduate in biological sciences, and my dad also in biological sciences. One of them is a botanist, the other one is a zoologist. I guess botanists and zoologists like each other, I guess.
That worked out for them. Did they meet while they were in medical school?
No, they
or
they
arranged
grew up
marriage,
in the same,
perhaps.
Actually, that's quite an interesting story. They grew up in the same village, and arranged marriages were very much the norm.
Of course, yeah.
And
even today, to a certain extent, from many of my Indian friends.
Much less in the metropolitan areas, of course. But they grew up in a small village on the coast of Bay of Bengal. One of the things that as we grew up as children, came to know is that these two people actually chose themselves
that's nice.
and went to their parents and said, "Hey, we want to marry." So that I'm sure has caused a sensation in the village, because that's not
that just didn't happen back in those days.
In those days it didn't happen.
Were you a good student in school?
Yeah, I was looking back, what I realize now is till about the 7th or 8th grade, I was an okay student, and nothing much to write home about, right? but starting around 8th grade, I just took off, and
was there a seminal event or something that happened in the 8th grade?
I think so. At that time, I did not realize, and I tend to really believe that what a kid focuses on and what a kid takes pride in depends so much on the adults that surround them.
Right.
So I think the reason for the flip has been a couple of my teachers. Both of them happen to be physics teachers. One is Mr. Rao, another one is Mr. Wilfred.
Amazing, you remember their names. That's great.
Oh, yeah. You always remember the people who've been very influential. Right?
Yeah.
So in retrospect, what I realized is they would really be passionate about the subject of physics and would explain it so well that it was as if I was going through a mystery novel or something.
Wow.
It would completely engage you. And
they were to transfer the passion, it sounds like.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
When you really work hard to get some of the answers, they would encourage you. So for a kid at that age, I think to be acknowledged for the hard work and be encouraged, that can be a good catalyst for the change.
Absolutely.
So that's what I would say.
What about outside of class? I believe cricket's still the national sport, or was at that point in time, or a very popular one. Were you a cricket player, or were there other sports or music, theater you engaged with?
Yeah, I was okay in cricket. I think I had you have a batsman and a bowler.
Right.
Unlike it's like the batter and the pitcher, right?
Yep.
So I was never a good batsman, but I was an okay pitcher, okay bowler, I guess. There are two types of bowling. One is called the pace bowling, where you intimidate the batter by really chucking the ball really fast.
Really fast.
And I was never strong enough to do that, but so I made it up. I made it up by being a great spinner. Spinner is when you really spin the ball, and in cricket, the ball hits the ground before it goes towards the batter.
Right,
so that used to be my specialization. But I've never been an athlete. I guess I was more of a geek and into academics than sports. But
were there other things that you spent your time with outside of class?
Oh yeah. It was it used to be much less regimented, recreation for the kids.
Right.
When I compare with what my kids in Scottsdale, Arizona go through today, in a way, it's sad that they don't have that unstructured time to goof off with their friends and so on. So that's essentially what I think we did. And depending on the season, there used to be multiple sports or avocations for kids there, whether it's swimming in the local lake or flying kites.
Right.
There was a season around January where all the kids used to start flying kites, all kinds of colors. And I was pretty good at some types of that. There was kite flying as a sport was quite advanced in the sense that you would really try to fight with someone else using the kite, and the kind of thread that you would use will go and cut the thread of the other kite.
Oh, right. They're really fighting kites. I love it. Oh, that's great. So that was was it a competition or more of a personal play type of game?
It's a competition, but it wasn't it wasn't organized. You just
right. Of course. Yeah. Just go out to the field. And,
yeah.
And you were near the coast, so obviously you probably had very nice winds.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Hyderabad itself is a bit inland. My parents grew up in the coast. I grew up more in the plateau, which is Hyderabad. So a couple of things I wanted to say about my parents, if that's okay, absolutely. Right? So my dad, after his bachelor's in sciences, he went and got multiple master's degrees, including a degree in law and a degree similar to the CPA here, and so on. And he is a serial entrepreneur. Right now, he's 84 years old. He still works about 8 hours a day minimum. And in the last 2 years, he published three more books.
Wow.
So the work ethic definitely was a great influence on me. And my mom, after she had 3 kids, I have 2 younger sisters, she decided that she'll be a full-time mom, and she really took that job very seriously. And the fact that all 3 of us have master's degrees and doing very well in our professions is a testimony to her focus on education. One would think that with 2 parents, college graduates, you would have a comfortable living, but in the pre-liberalization India, that wasn't so.
Yeah.
Even educated.
Well, did you work? I mean, were there jobs that you did? I don't know much about the Indian culture in the high school years. In the U.S., of course, you start with paper routes and work retail and do a lot of things that help supplement the income. But I don't think that's quite the case, and probably wasn't, because the economy really wasn't that liberal when you were there, right?
Yes. Actually, I think the opportunities, even for adults, were so sparse that there's definitely no way a teenager
would take a job.
Take a job, right? So growing up, my parents would say the best thing you can do with your time is get good grades, because there's nothing else you can do now which will really enhance your long-term well-being.
Well, you went on to do that. You obviously got your initial electrical engineering degree in India, and then on to get both an MS in computer science as well as an MBA after you came to the U.S. What led you into engineering, particularly given that your parents were, both in kind of more of the biology and the
Biology
zoology
side.
fields?
Yeah, I go back to my physics teachers. I think,
Yeah.
you realize after all these years how small interactions can have a big impact. I fell in love with the physical sciences as against natural sciences.
Right.
Physics and math, more than even chemistry, really had a kind of an elegance to them. It's not that you need to just learn things by heart in a rote memory. Everything flowed from a logic that reveals itself. The more you know, the more more elegant it shows. So that love for physical sciences, I think, got me into engineering.
That's awesome. Now, did you take your first job in India, or did you come straight over to the U.S. for your MS in computer science at Northwestern?
That's a great question, actually. If you may, that might result in a 2-minute answer. It might be worth
That's
it.
All right.
Right? So I worked and got into this thing called the IIT, Indian Institute of Technology. It is similar to the best engineering schools in the U.S., for example.
And that's in Madras, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, right. Which is a very different part. I mean, that's quite far from Hyderabad, right? A different cultural area, as well as a different geoclimate as well.
Completely, because India is a quite rightly called a subcontinent. You go from one state to another, it's completely different. And the language spoken is different. And I didn't know the language when I went there.
Wow.
All that. The IITs were super competitive colleges to get into. In those days, there were only 5 IITs amongst a sea of underfunded, mediocre engineering schools. These 5 IITs were definitely world class.
They were the cream of the crop.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you would rank the top 20 engineering schools in the world, those 5 would be there. They were that good, right? And so the ratio, about 1.5 lakhs, which translates to 150,000 kids used to compete in those exams, and about 1,500 were chosen. So it was extremely competitive.
Very competitive,
right? So I got into that and got a real world-class education. And what you realize is that that education was completely free because the government would subsidize everything. Other than the money that your parents put for your food, you're not spending anything at all. And majority of my class, as well as all my seniors in the previous years, used to, after they graduate from the IIT, would be lured away by the US universities or multinational corporations and go work in greener pastures. A small minority of the kids used to say, okay, I'll stay back here. I was one of those.
You're one of those, right?
Yeah. So out of the 23 people in the electrical engineering class that I was in, 3 of us stayed back for various reasons.
Only 3. My goodness.
And 2 of us said, oh, this is a poor country. It has spent so much money on our behalf. Let's stay back and build something. So I stayed back.
And what did you do? What was that first job then out of college?
It was software development. And the first 2 years, I actually went to a refractory manufacturer. These are the manufacturer of these tiles that line blast furnaces and so on, and created their first computer department to do their data processing and all that.
Yeah. Did they give you some leadership responsibilities early on there? Were you managing people eventually?
Not much managing people as much as managing technology. There was an older gentleman who was better at managing people.
Okay.
But I had free reign on how the technology should be brought into that industry and so on.
Right, right. Well,
So
what
it took
prompted
about,
the decision to go on to Northwestern and complete your education there?
that's a great point.
Yeah.
So I said, coming out of college in IIT, I said, I need to stay back in this poor country and help and so on, right? So in 4 years, that idealism had been beaten out of me.
Some of us are slow learners, right, Shashi?
Yeah.
I'm kidding.
No, so in the liberalization India, meritocracy was not really your ticket to success, and who you knew mattered more than what you did. Right nowadays, it's completely different. Right. So what I realized by around 89 is that if you stay in a low opportunity economy like this, in spite of all your effort, you are definitely making peanuts. You can't help anyone with so you need to go where you can make some money, and then you can help people. Then you can put some force and resources behind what you want to do. And so I came to the US not for studies, but actually coincidentally, in my morning newspaper in Hyderabad, there was an ad from a Chicago management consulting firm saying they want to recruit some good Unix engineers. And I was a pretty good, Unix is a computer operating system technology. And I was pretty good at it. I applied for it, came to Evanston, Illinois, which is a suburb of Chicago. And why Evanston is important is because I worked full time at this company. It's a management consulting firm, still very thriving. It's called ZS Associates, amazing company. And Evanston happens to be the place where Northwestern University also is. An amazing university, private university, and a great engineering school. Every day I used to walk past that campus and I just couldn't help myself. I said, okay, I'll work full time, but I'll find a way to get a master's degree. So I went and got a master's in computer science, studying part time, working full time. That's how I ended up in Northwestern.
Awesome. And then you worked for a while before going back to get your MBA. So tell us a little bit about that first job and how you made your choices around coming out of Northwestern.
Yeah, while working at ZS and later a company called SEI that became Solugenix, which is the company I lead now.
Got it.
Right. I used to run projects that utilized my experience both in electronics, because I had a bachelor's degree in electronics engineering and master's in computer science, and my software experience. So the kinds of projects that we did, the projects that I led, were similar to what I did at Motorola. In those days, Motorola was definitely a major innovator. Motorola invented the concept of cellular phones.
That's right.
And
I remember having one of those bricks years and years ago.
Yeah. Even before the brick cell phones, we had what we called as car phones because they were so big.
That's right. Yeah, they came out first. Yeah, they could fit in the console, in the middle console.
You couldn't even hold it with your two hands like a brick. So it was a car phone. So one of the most complex projects that I led, and I'm still very proud of it, is outfitting the entire cell phone manufacturing factories of Motorola in a couple of locations in Illinois with computers and data networks that not only monitor the whole production process as it happens, but analyze how the factory is doing and take corrective actions. So suppose in in an electronics factory that makes cell phones. There are these machines called the placement machines. They place various chips on boards. If something goes wrong and the machine is not stopped, you will lose a lot more money and a lot more time. So you want to have computers really monitoring every second, every machine out there. So we outfitted the entire factory with those. So the background in both electronics and software and statistical process control, all that really helped. It's because we were all engineers who really loved technology and engineering. It's as they say, catnip for cats, right? So
I love it.
We were on cloud nine to say that was the best job anyone could give. So I was very happy.
So you went on and got your MBA at Booth. Great school.
So you asked me a question, what made you go through MBA? And as you grow, you understand that the most complex and most challenging, or possibly even most consequential and beneficial problems are not dealing with just computers and machines. It's dealing with people. Because if you can have the best technology, best hardware, best software, best smarts, but if you're not able to motivate people to do the work, or if you're not able to build a team out of a group, your project can't succeed. You live and learn. And it was a humbling experience for me, because coming out of an elite engineering school, you have a chip on your shoulder saying that, okay, I'm smart, I can solve any problem, but you can't without the help of humans. So that was a mystery to me. So I said, let me go to the other side and learn this mysterious thing called, there's a friend of mine, Ray is his name. He's a great CIO in the New York area. He used to always say, Shashi, it's easy to manage the silicon units. It's the carbon units that give you trouble, because carbon units never work to spec. Carbon units are humans. Silicon units are computers. Right. So an MBA, I thought I need to really hang out with people who are not engineers and see how they think, how they solve problems, because there are very few problems of consequence that you can solve with just one or two people and with just technology.
That's right.
And the University of Chicago is still one of the best MBA schools in the world. And I was always fascinated by the Chicago School of Economic Thought. Milton Friedman has always been my idol. So I went to University of Chicago and got an MBA.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So went on to your career, which obviously led you up to joining Solugenix, which we talked about a little bit in your bio, but you had a few jobs before that and kind of managed your path. Did you kind of have in mind that you wanted to lead a company someday, and particularly coming out of MBA school, or was your journey kind of more one of, one job to the next, and then all of a sudden found yourself at the top?
Yeah, so it wasn't that sometime when I was in my 20s and I sat down and wrote a plan and said, by the time I am 35, I'll be an entrepreneur. Far from it. As they say, life is what happens to you when you're planning something else, right? So how I ended up becoming an entrepreneur was after working in Chicago for this company and a spinoff, which is a great story in itself, a spinoff called Navtech. I moved to Arizona because one of my buddies out of New York convinced me that this internet revolution that started around 99 has legs, and I have this opportunity to lead the national delivery team of a few thousand people out of Phoenix, Arizona. So I came here and really grew the Western region there from nothing to several hundreds of people. And during those years, before the crash, the internet companies were flush with cash. So they went and acquired companies left and right. So these guys in New York in the headquarters would acquire companies and they would realize that they're bleeding money. And they'd say, okay, we need to send someone to fix it. They'll say, okay, Shashi, we have this next project, so go here and fix that. So two such acquisitions that I had the privilege of going and turning around. One of them was a company they acquired out of Provo, Utah. The other one was out of Wellington, New Zealand, as well as Sydney, Australia.
Wow, those are diverse points in the globe.
Yeah, and it was you couldn't pay someone to get that kind of experience. So
right.
For me, who lived in Chicago for more than a decade and then Arizona, to go to Provo, Utah, and turn around a company, an amazing company that pioneered a lot of UI and UX revolutions, and that was quite a valuable experience. How do you preserve the value? How do you make sure that people are not spooked, and at the same time make some tough decisions to balance the books and turn it around? So after the Utah experience, I gained some confidence. So they said, okay, we acquired a larger company which is losing even more money. Why don't you go to Sydney?
And they had more confidence in you.
Yes. So I told my wife, okay, we just had our daughter. She was not even 1 year old. I said, we are moving to New Zealand and Australia.
Wow.
I'm blessed with a spouse who's very understanding. So she said, okay. So we went there. I turned that also around, and it was a great experience to live in a different culture. We tend to think of UK, Australia, New Zealand to be similar to us in culture, especially in business culture, but there are so many differences, so many nuances. It was a very enriching experience. So I came back.
Yeah.
So by the time I came back, I was really feeling very confident. You might say cocky. I said, okay, here I am. I've been able to take these companies that are 10 million or 50 million in revenues that were losing money left and right. I was able to turn them around within 12 months each. So why don't I do it myself? Why do I do it for some New York-based company?
Right.
So I actually landed back in Phoenix with a business plan, and I called a couple of my buddies who happened to be my colleagues, and I said, guys, I want to be an entrepreneur. Are you in? They said, yes, we want to be entrepreneurs also. You go first. So I resigned first, and you would know it. I resigned on September 1st, 2001.
Oh my goodness, you're kidding. Oh,
and
10
everyone
days,
knows
90.
what. So
yes, 9 days
I
before.
had all these plans for developing a certain software for a niche that we have identified, and then going and selling. And we said, okay, we're just coming out of the recession from early 2001. Now it's only way up. And of course, on September 11, all heck breaks loose.
Goodness,
right?
Yeah.
So those 9 months, so I went to my wife and I said, no one was giving any projects. No one was spending any money. I said, give me about 9 months. If I don't make this at least a break-even thing, if I don't close any business, I'll swallow my pride and I'll come back, take any job, because we didn't have many savings. We were, so I didn't want to jeopardize the financial stability of the family on such a big Hail Mary pass, right?
Right.
So I had 9 months. So lo and behold, in the 8th month, we closed the first project. But those 8 months were possibly the best 8 months looking back. Living through them wasn't easy, But as I said, with the Australian and the New Zealand experiences, you couldn't pay anyone to get that much of experience.
Right. Well, what a terrific story. So looking back now, Solugenix has been almost 16 years, right? 15 years and a few. If you had to talk about kind of your leadership style, how would you say that's evolved over time?
It has evolved definitely. As you get older, you get wiser, I guess, right? But
hopefully,
yes,
it's not always the case.
It's not always the case. Yes. So, but some common tenets have remained with me, and I think those are who you are, and you can't change those things. So. Um, I really value authenticity in other people. I can see, I tell myself that I am a pretty good judge of people. If someone's posturing too much, I get really switched off. So I make it a point to make sure that I'm authentic in everything I do, and tell people things I do know, things I think I do know, things I know that I don't know, right? And be open about the good decisions we made and the decisions that didn't pan out, the really bad decisions we made, and so on. I think so. We are blessed with a management team that is of very similar culture, exactly the same culture. If you're familiar with the Patrick Lencioni model of team maturity, one of the things that I love about what Lencioni says is a good team is made based on being vulnerable to each other. If you're trying to impress each other, then you will never make a good team.
No room for ego.
No room for ego. So we see a lot of people who are open about what they know, what they don't know, open about their fears. And then in spite of that, we make decisions, we make tough decisions, and we put a lot of effort behind that.
How many employees today at Solugenix in various locations?
We have about 400 plus, including some part-time employees. And majority of our employees are in Southern California, but also in Arizona, in Georgia, and Missoula, Montana is the next larger office. We operate out of 12 different states.
Wow.
We actually pioneered this work at home model.
Yeah.
So we actually feel that there is a demography around the country, especially in rural America and small town America, where highly educated people, because of some personal circumstances, are stuck in a small town, and that doesn't have too many high technology or deeper business skill roles that they are capable of. So we reach out to them, and we have refined the HR policies, the pay policies, the IT infrastructure, and the security infrastructure to enable people to work from where they want to work. Right?
Well, circling back to what we talked about early on and bringing COVID front and center here, boy, it sounds like you're really ahead of the curve. I've been theorizing in my business and executive search that a remote workforce is something that we'll all have to embrace, for a number of very good reasons, health-wise, of course, and people's safety first and foremost. But it sounds like you've already got that in place. How is it working for you through this crisis?
Yeah, the moving to work at home was very smooth for us because a good part of our workforce already works from home.
Right.
And we already know as I said, the infrastructure, the policies and training you need to make that thing work. So what we realized in late March and early April, when each county or each state started mandating work at home, is that we have a lot to offer We have offered our
Yeah.
services, consulting services, to a couple of our large customers, as well as we put on our website, and it became very popular. We shared, of course, for free with anyone who needs it, checklists of the 15 things you need to do in your HR policy before you send people home, or 30 things you need to look at in your IT infrastructure before you start doing your work from home, and financial things you need to talk to your banker about, and so on. So
I'd love to have those, by the way.
yeah,
We'll have to separately connect after the podcast. That
yeah,
sounds
yeah. I
truly
can send.
interesting because I think you are really ahead of the curve where so many companies are going to really have to be to survive in a post-COVID world.
Yeah, and we realized that it would be a living document.
Yeah.
No one has a monopoly on great ideas, so we thought
Right.
if
Right.
someone uses these checklists and they find additional things we need to look at, so they can contribute. So we made it into a Creative Commons copyright,
It's
so
awesome.
anyone
So it's
can
a
share and
dynamic
contribute.
document. Awesome. Awesome. The challenges of company culture, though, are a little more, are different, maybe not more difficult when you're so dispersed, both geographically, time zone, et cetera. How do you, as CEO, continue to communicate about culture? And, what are your thoughts on continuing to build that now that you're going into your 16th year?
Yeah, we definitely have evolved in the way we thought about culture and in the way we nurtured the right culture.
Right. Right.
Early on, I did what most organizations do. We sat down in a workshop and said, "What are our values? What do we really
Mm,
believe in?" It I didn't ever want it to be my personal values that are pushed down the throat of the management team and the
right.
rest of the
Right.
team. I really wanted to discover, by asking, by observing, what are the values that our team has come in with
Mm,
already. Because in those days we were much smaller. There were 40 people in the entire company in 2004.
wow. Yeah.
So it was easier to do. So we definitely had a vision statement, mission statement, and values, and so on.
Yeah. Yeah.
After running the organization for about 10 years, I have started seeing the limitations in that approach. And almost by accident, I listened to a talk by a gentleman called Dave Friedman,
Mm,
somewhere in Los Angeles, several years back, 5 or 6 years back. And we embraced that approach to culture.
mm,
Dave Friedman's approach is as follows. What he says is, just standing on a hill and exhorting to your troops, saying that these are the values that we have, doesn't help, not because they don't want to follow those values, but they need a bit more guidance on what does that value mean in a day-to-day activity. How does that value manifest itself in my day-to-day life, right? You can say integrity is our value. Everyone says that, right? It's like motherhood and apple pie.
right. Right.
Who can object to integrity? But what does integrity mean in this particular decision that I need to make where there are no good choices, right?
Yeah.
How would so people need more guidance. So
Yeah.
we embraced what we call as a behavior based value system.
Mm,
We actually came up with 30 different behaviors that we say are behaviors that a Solugenix team member exhibits. For example, one of those behaviors, I love it, is assume positive intent. When
right.
someone says something or does something, don't jump to a conclusion that they're doing with malicious intent. Assume good intent. And if good intent is not compatible with that behavior, ask them,
Yeah.
"Hey, I believe you are a good person. Why did you behave this way?" Right?
mm,
So assume good intent. It sounds very prosaic and not very um, important. But once something like that behavior becomes widespread in an organization, you'll see the power of it. You don't lose your potential or effort in the wrong things, right? That's an example of that.
Fabulous. Well, listen, Shashi, this has been incredible conversation and far-reaching, and I'm looking forward to following up on some of these core principles, the remote working as well as the behavioral descriptions. I think that's just so important, particularly for the company of the 21st century, to post-COVID to succeed. But we do have just one last question for you. What kind of career and life advice would you give someone who maybe has their eyes on the corner office? Maybe they're in their 30s or their 40s and they're thinking about, getting to that top some point in time, or perhaps they want to be an entrepreneur like you. What would you tell them, or perhaps your younger self at that time? I'll let you to answer the question either way.
God, I can fill a book with instructions to my younger self. Right. So, specific advice for young entrepreneurs who want to really become the CEO. I don't have any experience or advice for people who want to become CEO in the corporate world.
Right.
What I would say is really understand one industry deeply before you jump in. It's always easier, cheaper, more efficient to learn all your lessons while being an employee. It is hard. Entrepreneurship is hard, even when you have decades of experience in that industry. Don't be in a hurry. Take your time. And if there is one book I would recommend to anyone, it is by Eric Ries. I think it's called The Lean Startup.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Very good one.
No one has a fully baked idea that can go to market without any mutation, without any tweaking.
Right.
Always be open in the first few years, at least, of your venture, to be very open to what the market is saying and be humble about your own smarts and be open to changing your great idea. That's what I would say.
Well, Shashi Jasthi, President and CEO of Solugenix, thank you so much for sharing your journey into the corner office.
I really appreciate this, Brent. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Into the Corner Office with Brant Handley. We hope you enjoyed hearing our guest CEO story as much as we did. If you want to hear more CEOs reveal their journey into the corner office, please subscribe via iTunes and tell your friends and colleagues. For more information about Brant, Resource Options International, and the mighty middle market, visit www.goforroi.com. We look forward to having you join us for our next episode.